Okay, good morning. Hi, this is Steve Sabadeski, publisher of IUBuzz.com. And this morning, the morning after the big debate up in Baton Rouge, the U.S. Senate race election, we have Jim Brown and Lawrence Shahardy to sort of do a post-mortem on the debate. So I'm just wondering, well, first of all, good morning, Jim and Lawrence.
Good morning.
Morning to you, Steve. Glad to be with you today.
Thank you. So I have really three questions to focus on. Number one is, what do you believe, and Jim, why don't you start this off? What do you believe was last night's debate most important storyline?
Well, no good news in terms of any change that took place. What we saw was a rehash, and I like to talk about this. I'm kind of mad about this, Steve, quite frankly. You know, we get very emotional on your show. I'm mad at the press, at those who ask the questions. You know, they throw out a question, and Cassidy, for example, the congressman up where I live in Baton Rouge, just regurgitates, it's all Obama's fault, everything in the world's Obama's fault. Well, what are you going to do, Congressman? What are you going to do? You sit there and you bitch and moan. You've done the whole campaign. When you even show up, you want us to give you one of the most important jobs in America, yet you won't do anything but just complain, complain, complain. And I can say that about all three candidates. And so the biggest thing that came out for me was the lack of those organizing all these debates about giving us some information. The average voter out there doesn't really know a lot about these candidates, except that one's a Democrat who pretty much votes for the president, and the other one's an obstinate Republican. Then there's this guy, Manis, out there, seems like a nice fella who's a little over his head. And that started from day one, and I guess the thing I took about it, the last debate, boy, this is a chance to make your case, to really put some zingers out there. And then the big thing, too, then, and Lawrence, I wish you'd talk about this because you've always been a good visionary talking about the future. There was no vision. There was no one saying, look, this is really important. Let me tell you about the future of our country. If we're going to be an exceptional nation, we've got to do more in Washington. 1, 2, 3. We got none of that. I think the candidates did a terrible job, but even worse were the press people there or the people asking the questions. They did a very, very poor job in this debate and all the debates. So that's my overview, a really lousy show. It was a waste of time for Louisiana voters. You pretty much have to go into this unknown about, well, I don't like the Democrats, I want the Republicans, or vice versa. As personalities, all three were duds, and the press particularly were duds in how they handled it.
Okay, so from dud to Lawrence.
I wish I wasn't following duds.
I tell you, really.
Well, first off,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead, Steve.
No. I was going to joke.
Well, look. First off, there's this assumption that members of the media really and truly know any more about what's going on than the general public. And you saw a lot of softball questions last night. You saw a lot of softball questions in the previous debate. Candidates in debates want to stick to their storyline. And if you ask them a question, they're going to jump to that stump speech, maybe a condensed version of it, but that section of the stump speech that they give on whatever that topic is. Because President Obama is so unpopular in Louisiana, that's why you hear Congressman Cassidy and Colonel Manis saying, you know, the entire world is bad because of Barack Obama. Mary Landrieu finds herself in a rather awkward position of having been pretty loyal to the president as far as her votes are concerned and her support for his programs. But at the same time, she knows the president is incredibly unpopular in Louisiana, and so she tries to distance herself as best she can, while at the same time wearing that mantle of being a Democrat who has historically supported the president. I did not believe last night there were any knockouts. I thought it was rather frustrating that both Republicans basically laid the faults of the world on Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama has a lot to be responsible for, and I think he has lacked leadership in a lot of areas. But like Jim, I'd like to hear, what are you going to do about it? You know, what is it you're going to do? If the Affordable Care Act is bad, it has bad parts in it, you need to fix it, then we have 2 members of Congress running for the Senate. What legislation have you introduced to fix it? We didn't hear anything about that, if any, if they've introduced anything. We didn't hear anything about that. So I don't think there were any knockouts last night. I think if you were leaning toward Mary Landrieu, you're still leaning that way. The same thing with Congressman Cassidy. The only other thing I will say is that, and I have to follow up on something Jim said in passing, it does appear that Colonel Maness is really either in over his head, or it's just a lack of experience in political circles. If you listen to what he said last night, it was really all broad generalities. And he was basically jumping on the frustration that people have with Washington. And I fully understand that. I mean, I don't know a single person who is not frustrated with Washington. But when you're running for the Senate, when you're running for a big office like this, you have to say what it is you want to do. It's not good enough to simply say, we're going to sit at the table and figure this out.
Okay, my turn. I think that the biggest storyline, or at least maybe 2 of the big storylines, number 1, is that Rob Maness basically went after Mary Landrieu. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about Maness being a stalking horse, that he's in the race, that he's being paid and funded by the Landrieux or friends of the Landrieux. But you know, if that were ever true, I think he dismissed that. And so I think that from a poll standpoint, I think that, you know, what he's trying to do is, I think at least, is to make the best case that he is with the people more than Cassidy, and so he's trying to get into that runoff. Otherwise, I don't understand why he took on Landrieu as much as he did, because for the last year and a half or so, his focus, quite frankly, has been on Cassidy. So, I mean, I was really stunned by that. Any thoughts about that, or?
Well, he may be getting. I think he's been getting some complaints about that, though, as he winds this thing down. I never thought he was a spoiler or was in there with someone else's agenda but his own. I think he was a very genuine candidate, and I think he was encouraged by some early Tea Party support. I think he could really take off. But realistically, I think he's getting some advice. Look, you're probably not going to get in this runoff. As a consequence, if you want to have a future here, you've been very, very hard on Cassidy. We're not telling you to back off or apologize, but you've kind of not been quite as tough on Landrieu, and you need to kind of satisfy your base. They're hungry. They're out for blood. They think they got Mary Landrieu on the ropes. And maybe he's kind of doing some, you know, a little future thinking here with a week to go in the election, saying, well, I'm out of here. I still want to be a player. And I want to come back in the Republican Party and work with that very conservative wing. So that's just my surmise. I don't have any facts to point that out, but I think he's gotten a little bit more aggressive now on Landrieu for that very reason. He wants to be around after this election is over. And if he just is a spoiler and just someone that's kind of crybabying all the time, there's no role for him in the Republican Party. He may want to have that role, quite frankly, Steve.
Okay, which goes into my argument from 2 weeks ago that maybe he's not going to make it all the way. But anyway, that's a totally different hangout. All the way meaning to the end of this jungle primary. But okay, so the second question is, what do you think were the high points and low points for all the candidates?
Well, I'll start on that one. I think if there was a high point, I don't really think there was any real high points. On the immigration issue, Landrieu seemed a little bit more specific. I don't consider the high point for her, where Cassidy and Manis just dodged the immigration question. The immigration question so far has really not been played up as an issue at all. And Landrieu, and I don't think it's a particularly good position, says, hey, we can't get rid of 20 million people, and let's just embrace them and bring them on in, give them a path to citizenship. I don't think that's a popular position in Louisiana, but at least she was being very specific on that position, number one. So I don't really point to any high points other than what Lawrence said. No one really got burned. And I found that true in debates. Very rarely do you have a debate goes on where anybody is the real winner. You know, you just want to do damage control and get out with as little as you can where you don't hurt yourself. I've done a lot of debates when I ran for governor, when I was Secretary of State, when I was insurance commissioner, and I just wanted to get through them. I didn't feel like they helped me in any way at all. As far as the low points, though, there was no vision, as I said before. Cassidy just beating up on Obamacare. Okay, we've dealt with that for a year and a half, and I think voters have pretty much set up their minds, set up their agenda. Cassidy didn't give us any reason to vote for him other than they just can't stand Obama and they want the Republicans to take over. I think they all missed an opportunity. Here's how I see this, Steve. I think that 45% of the people on each side, Democrats and Republicans, are much there and decided. There is this middle of 6-7% who could well decide in the runoff who wins this election, and as a consequence, they're not real crazy about Barack Obama, but they also want to see a balance up in Washington, and so they're looking for a reason to vote, and that reason may make a decision in terms of who wins this election. You go back to Landrieu, say the last campaign, for example. She said she was against medical marijuana. Well, I think a large portion of our state is for medical marijuana, not regular marijuana. And you notice that Cassidy, the doctor, came out in favor of medical marijuana. I think they missed the chance to lay some differences that kind of gave some reason to those undecided voters to say, vote for me. They just rehashed the same old agenda. And I think there's a golden opportunity to say, look, I'm different here, and yes, we're different, Republican and Democrat, but I'm looking towards the future to bring Louisiana into the 21st century. Coastal erosion, for example, massive problem. Nothing was touched on that. So I think there was a number of missed opportunities to set them apart that may give some opportunities for Landrieu and casting the runoff, but they missed an opportunity last night.
Lawrence?
Well, first off, I think Senator Landrieu was much more passionate about many of her answers, and she got into specific detail about many of those answers that she gave, which I thought was to her credit. Now, like Jim, I'm not 100% sure that all of her answers were answers that a lot of people wanted to hear. A good example is the immigration. You know, it would been great if those candidates could have been grilled a little bit more on, all right, we've got 10 to 15 million people, whatever the number is, who have come across the border illegally. They just crossed over, and here they are. It's the fault of the federal government for not having patrolled the border and doing its job and following the law. But the fact is they're here. If your position is to send them back from whence they came, how are you going to do that? Just explain how that's going to occur. And then explain, if you're going to give them a path to citizenship, why is that fair when you look at people who followed the rules and came into America and followed the rules and became citizens? Why is that, you know, fair? Is that fair to them? So my point is that you could have gotten into a lot more detail, but we didn't. I still believe that this campaign, regrettably, has focused solely on President Obama. The message of Congressman Cassidy's commercials and everything that he's done has basically been, if you like Barack Obama, vote for my opponent. If you dislike Barack Obama, vote for me. And that's really been the tenor of the Republican campaign in this election. If you allow candidates to be superficial, they're going to be superficial. That was why, and Jim will relate to this, we always had our favorite reporters. Because before we did an interview, number one, we had a pretty good idea what they wanted to talk to us about. Number two, we already formulate in our minds what we want to say. And number three, if we had one of those softball reporters, we could say just about anything that sounded good, and we'd look great on TV. We wouldn't get challenged. We love those reporters. I loved them. I'm sure Jim loved them. And we had plenty of them. There were a handful, and literally a handful, that were actually good, that would ask you more questions and dig deeper and deeper. Those were the ones that you had to be much more precise and give much more thought to before they came to interview. So last night it was a softball. I thought Senator Landrieu was much more specific in a lot of her answers, which is what she wants to do. She wants to turn the focus away from the president and focus on her job performance for Louisiana. The Republicans want to focus on the president and say that by voting for Harry Reid, by voting for nominees to various departments and agencies, that by voting for them, you are in reality supporting the president. And the Republicans are saying you have to stop that in order to stop the president. So it depends on which side of the coin you want to come down on.
Okay. My opinion is, in terms of the high point, low point, Rob Maness, I think that the high point for him is that he survived. And he was able to capture his base and maintain it. The low point for him is that I think that if you see through what he's doing, it's very simple. He's just explaining very simple information, and there's nothing really there in terms of no arguments, no real positions. I mean, it's just nebulous, and so I was disappointed, with that. And I think that's kind of what y'all had also mentioned. Cassidy, high point is that he was able to just regurgitate everything that he has ever said, and that's Obama, Reid. I'm sick of it. I really am. I have no idea who Bill Cassidy is, and I have no idea. And it's hard for me to vote for anybody if they're unwilling to really say who they are. So to me, those are the high and low points for Bill Cassidy. Mary Landrieu, I think her high point was that that she was able to hit major points to her base. I certainly believe that her base are the Democrats, probably I'm sure blacks, and I think that she's seen more. Had more humanity. The low point, I think, for her is that when she made her statement, or at least comment about, well, I personally have evolved over the years regarding same-sex marriage, but that she would, I guess, allow that constitutional, at least the legislation. And I think she said constitutional law. Maybe you can help me with that to be the law of the state. I thought that I think that she maybe lost some of her base on that, and I also thought that maybe she wasn't being sincere about that.
Yeah, I think she's danced a little bit. I mentioned earlier about the medical marijuana and some of these issues where her position on a lot, no one's going to vote for Mary Landrieu or make any difference from, say, more conservative ranks based on her little equivocation on gay marriage. I mean, those positions are pretty much set in stone. So I've seen her equivocate a little bit more as she's trying to reach out to maybe some independents who are a little bit more conservative but aren't real crazy about giving the whole state to the Republicans. But in doing so, she's been a little awkward, and I don't think it's made any difference. May have actually, as you said, Steve, hurt her.
Okay, so will last night's debate make any difference at all in this election, which is Tuesday?
Lawrence, I don't know about you. I don't think so. First of all, I'm not sure how many people watched the debate. You had the final game of the World Series on. That certainly gave a lot of competition for sports fans, and I just don't think the campaign has engendered that much excitement to where you're on your edge waiting for this debate. That's not unique in this race, quite frankly, because I never thought anybody cared much about the gubernatorial debates, the other debates I was in to begin with. So, number one. Number two, and Steve, I wrote a column I sent down to you about the fact that just here today, it'll be on Bayou Buzz here later on today. The millennials, young people, just aren't very excited about this race. Number one, I'm finding overwhelmingly. Had a young lady tell me that when it comes to who controls the U.S. Senate, whoever wins, you're going to have some old white, out-of-touch white guy who's going to be running the Senate, whoever wins. And so why should I care? Number two, this campaign has not engendered the real energy and the one-on-one feeling about the candidates because retail politics is just not relevant anymore. If you go to all, when I was back, and Lawrence knows this too, Lawrence didn't miss a fair or festival in Jefferson Parish when he was the assessor all those years. I never missed the pecan festival, the frog festival, the rice festival. I never missed those events every single year. This year, there wasn't a statewide politician. Landrieu attended none of those kinds of things. Either did Manus. Manus, to some degree, did. Either did Cassidy. So it's all television-driven from outside the state. People are just kind of leery of that kind of thing. They don't see the candidates. There's no relationship with the candidates. So as a consequence, the enthusiasm is not there to watch these debates to begin with. When all is said and done, I don't think it's going to make any difference.
Lawrence?
Well, debates generally don't make a difference unless someone makes a major blunder. My philosophy has always been you can only hurt yourself in a debate. You can't really help yourself. Now, if your opponent makes a major blunder, he's hurt himself, and that can help you simply because you're the guy standing there with him. So I don't think debates really move voters one way or the other. The media likes it. They're probably a good thing to have because at least you see the candidates somewhat unscripted. So they serve a good purpose probably in that respect. Like Jim, I'm not certain how many people watched any of the debates, much less watched the debate last night. Here in the New Orleans market, it was not on a major television station. It was on Channel 12, WYES. It was on there, but it was not on Channel 8, and the MC was the major newscaster, the news anchor for Channel 8, John Snell. Did not appear on Channel 8 because they broadcast the baseball game. So I really don't know how many people actually saw the debate in this market. In the rest of the state, of course, the competition obviously was the baseball game, which seemed to turn out to be a pretty good game. I didn't get to watch it, but it appears to have been a fairly good game. So again, I don't think debates make a whole lot of difference. I think they're more negative. You go back and remember the Gerald Ford Jimmy Carter debate where Gerald Ford said that there was no communist influence in Eastern Europe, I believe, or something to that effect. And of course, that was not true, and that helped Jimmy Carter win that election. So, they don't really do a lot, in my opinion. I think, as I said at the very beginning, if you were for Mary Landrieu when you turned it on, you're still for her. If you were for Bill Cassidy or Rob Maness, you're still for them. And it has not made much of a difference.
And the only thing I'd throw in, and if you're kind of uncertain about either candidate or about any of the candidates, and you really haven't made your mind up, you may not have made your mind up yet. I don't think the debates did anything to reinforce or give you some reason to vote for one or the other. So what that means is, in this runoff, you're going to have 2 or 3% of the population that is going to be overwhelmed, and the polls will show that. Boy, can you imagine the massive media, direct mail, everything else going on to try to make that slight difference in who actually wins this election.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. I personally believe that did it make a difference? The answer is yes, and that is that Mary Landrieu did not hit a home run. and I think she had to. Keep in mind, look at the politics. She must win Tuesday. She must win right out, heads up, and she must get the 50.1 and 50 plus 1. Did she do enough last night to get her there? No. And so, from that standpoint, I think that she didn't hit a home run. She hit a double, but so did the other guys. So that, to me, I think that was a difference maker. Any other comments?
No, I think we'll watch it with interest. It's going to be fun next Tuesday night because of the implications of control of the Senate primarily, and so I'm looking forward to. And most people may not have watched the debates, but there's going to be a lot of national interest. So I'm going to sit back with a cold brew and enjoy it all, and maybe we can talk about it after it's all over and put it in perspective here, Steve.
Absolutely, Lawrence.
Yeah, I think Tuesday night's going to be a fun night. If you're a political junkie, I think you're going to enjoy Tuesday night, not only watching Louisiana, but watching the rest of the country and seeing whether or not Republicans will take control of the Senate or not.
Good enough. Okay, take care of yourself, and we'll see you Tuesday.
All right. Thank you, Steve.